Hey y'all, and good now, whenever and wherever this finds you. More evidence that the universe lines up to support you. Today I found this man in Vermont, Ilam Madden, and he's running in the Republican Party as an independent, and he has a lot of ideas that fit right into what I was talking about, where we have to create outside of the current system a parallel system, and through people power we give it a reality that can actually stand up to and compete with the current system. So here's him at Jimmy Dore. So here we go.
His name is Ilam Madden. He's a former member of the U.S. Marine Corps. He's an entrepreneur and an anti-war activist. He's currently running as the Republican nominee for the United States House of Representatives seat in Vermont. Anyway, after leaving the Marines in 2007, our guest Madden served as the chair of the board of directors of the Iraq Veterans Against the War. That's nice. He's a critic of the two-party system. He has stated that if elected, he will not caucus with the House Republicans. So let's welcome our first guest. Ilam Madden is here. Hi, Liam. Thanks for coming on.
Jimmy, this is such a pleasure. Right, just to be a credible candidate, you need to be able to remove one of the parties from the platform to at least give the voters a chance to not consider their vote a spoiler vote,
right,
where they're just splitting it, and to give me a better chance to win. But I was not hiding the fact at all that I'm an independent, that I would not caucus with the Republicans or the Democrats, and that the two-party system is preventing us from solving problems. It doesn't represent us well. It's driving us apart, and it's controlled by oligarchs. So, and on principle, I'm an independent, but on competitive nature, I'm just a practical person.
I've been very upfront the entire election, every single chance I get to speak to the public, to say I'm an independent running in the Republican Party. That's you talking. The entire theme of my candidacy is to structurally, culturally, and technologically create an alternative to the two-party dominance of our political system, which I think is deeply dysfunctional. It's going to take a departure from this divisive, corrupt, oligarch-controlled, and ultimately non-representative and non-functional system.
And I have some deeply progressive roots and positions myself. For instance, on the war in Ukraine, I asked the question, would you allow Ukraine to join NATO? And she was like, well, I would have to think about that because, and I'm just like, that means immediate war with Russia. Of course you don't do that, So I won for two reasons, I would say. One is that there were two Trump conservatives that split each other's vote. And the other reason is the moderates just didn't have someone that really was speaking to them at all. So I didn't go into the Republican primary bashing Republicans, obviously. I was talking about the ways I did share values with conservatives, and but also not really pulling any punches. I think Trump is a dangerous fraud. And I think there's a fair amount of Vermont Republicans that agree with that are pretty moderate, reasonable people.
But you would also agree that Joe Biden is a dangerous fraud.
Oh, absolutely. Okay. Yeah, I would say if we were left between a choice between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, we've failed as a country. Well, absolutely, the health of our political system and a whole slate of reforms to it that I think aren't part of what either party really acknowledges. And I call that rebirthing democracy. My website is not called Ilam Madden for Congress. It's called rebirthdemocracy.com. Another big issue I'm running on is I'm a renewable energy professional. I co-won MIT's Solve Award for Climate Change Solutions. And I am running on the fact that climate change is not the majority of our sustainability problems. It should be viewed more as a symptom and not a cause. And the cause is an economy that, like a shark, needs to keep swimming in order to not die. Our economy needs to constantly keep growing and using more energy. And we don't have enough land to power that energy with renewables or enough fossil fuels to keep doing it indefinitely, obviously. And so we need a deep foundational shift in our economic system. And you can't do that. Can't solve a really complex, scary problem like changing an economic system without a lot of buy-in from the population to make it a healthy system. And so you need foundational changes to our politics. So those are two of my most foundational issues.
I don't know what your policy is that you just talked about. You want to change the system. How do you want to do it? And what would it look like?
First, let's talk about the political side of that. So the Constitution was designed to prevent the concentration of power, right? And the checks and balance systems were mainly to prevent different branches of the government from overpowering the others. But the only check that the people have against the government itself is voting every 2 to 4 years, often for the lesser of two evils. And that is clearly not enough to course correct a system that becomes entrenched in its own brokenness. So we need more and new mechanisms for citizen engagement that can bypass gridlock or corruption or politicians who just don't listen. So there's a whole range of them on my website, rebirthdemocracy.com. I'll cover a couple. One is just simply the idea of forums, formal forums where people can suggest ideas. And just like social media is a forum technology that is driven by AI to filter to the top the most vitriolic bullshit, and that gets you addicted to it. Now, if we just switch that technology to function in the opposite direction, where it filtered to the top the best modeling of behavior that promotes empathy, perspective taking, and ideas that transcend and synthesize the best values that we have to offer, then you can start to have people not just have more power through ballot initiatives or federal ballot initiatives, but people be better at wielding that power, at being wiser. So that's one level of just like forums and federal ballot initiatives. Mike Gravel, the senator who ran for president, talked about federal initiatives a lot. To the most far-reaching and comprehensive would be this thing called liquid democracy, which is the idea that with technology, you can flow, like liquid, your vote to someone you trust that knows more about something than you do. So Plato had a critique of democracy. Hey, the people who don't know anything about sailing shouldn't be the ones steering the ship. And so that's why we have a republic, because the more informed you are, allegedly, the better you should be at making complex decisions. But the people in Congress are not that informed about all the issues we have. And in order to actually have knowledge be connected to trust, so that there's power should have both knowledge and trust involved in it. And liquid democracy is a method of allowing people to allocate trust to where there is knowledge, to keep the knowledgeable accountable to the public, and to hopefully get better decisions. So there's a range of topics I talk about. Just a comprehensive revolution in civic education would be a big part of it as well. But I'm talking about ideas that are generally completely new to the two-party debate that help to bypass the two parties in the first place. Because Thomas Jefferson said, there is no safe depository for the ultimate power of society other than the people themselves. So if the system is broken, it's not just changing the face of one party that will fix it. You need something from outside of that system to influence it, and it has to be the people, right? So what ways can we innovate to bypass the gridlock and corruption and have the people put their best ideas forward? So those are the kinds of things I'm thinking about. Sure. All right. So first of all, forums are nothing if they're not attached to actual power, right? So the forums are just a way to tell legislators, hey, we want this, because Princeton University says that there is a 0% correlation between whether people want something as the greater part of the population and if it happens. So a forum is a formal way of showing legislators, hey, we want this. And if there's enough support, then we should be able to bypass politicians altogether. So it's a more formal way of polling that actually generates a forced action onto the legislatures. So it's like, hey, wait, 55% people, then you at least need to talk about the bill. If 75% people want it, you absolutely need to pass it, right? Or so it's attaching the forum, which is getting people to show what they want, to ballot initiatives and referenda that are federally initiated and done more than every 2 to 4 years, so that the input the public is having actually has the weight of force, right? Like they have to do it. So that's one thing. So forums alone don't mean anything. I agree. They need to be part of a suite of technologies. And liquid democracy is the idea of flowing your vote to people who know more about a given subject, so that hopefully instead of all power being concentrated in Congress, where there's basically 435 lawyers who are controlled by corporations, there's just another check and balance where there's people who actually know could potentially also bypass politicians. So imagine you don't know anything about farming, Jimmy, but you know your friend Steph, who happens to know a lot about it. You can help Steph accumulate more power because she actually knows about it and you trust her. And therefore, people like Steph can help to bypass the BS corruption gridlock of the two-party system, just to having another means of having the people influence what policy is. So I'm not saying get rid of Congress. I'm saying we need other means to do it. Forums and ballot initiatives are one way to do it if it's done well, and as well as this, this is a more comprehensive idea called liquid democracy. That would be further down the line, of course, but just to introduce, there has to be ways other than just voting that allow voting for representatives that allow people to influence what policies actually get passed.
Are you or no?
Minimum wage of $12.55 an hour, which is Vermont's minimum wage for small businesses, and $18 an hour for large businesses. I think small businesses and large businesses need to be treated very differently, and we need to tilt the playing field in favor of small businesses. Can I also just add to that one of the ways I also view a priority in economics and wage is that creating pathways to worker and employee ownership has to be part of the story. So if you're a small business and you're sharing your profits, then that's one of the ways that your concern is met, as well as my concern about making sure small businesses are more competitive.
You're talking about profit sharing for the workers. Yes. Okay.
I'm so glad you asked me this. I really want to end on a point that really ties in how influential you've been, actually. So I was in military basic training when the United States invaded Iraq, and I immediately didn't think this was right. And one thing leads to another, and I did have to deploy to Iraq. And at the time, it was already clear to me in late 2004 that there were no mass weapons of mass destruction, that the Bush regime had lied through its teeth. And when I got back, I was, propaganda used to be through bumper sticker, believe it or not, kids, bumper sticker and TV news. And there was this yellow ribbon on everyone's bumper sticker that said, support the troops. And that really meant, if you don't support the war, keep your mouth shut, you damn traitor. And I was just so appalled that we knew as a country that this war was completely unjustified, was criminal, and was destroying the lives of innocent people. And why wasn't it yet the people just burning down the White House? How could we let this happen? And I reasoned that the only historical example I really knew at the time was that in Nazi Germany, not all Germans were evil people. They just felt the social pressure to conform that they became the good Germans. And I decided then and there that no amount of social pressure would ever make me go along with evil. And I decided to start organizing from within the military. That was risking a treason sentence, which is punishable by death. And so when I saw forced to vote, I thought, that's some stroke of brilliance organizing. And that is what helped me to see that, the nail in the coffin. I was already super skeptical about every single ounce of politics in this country, but the nail in the coffin of the progressive wing of the Democratic Party as a force for change was that, Jimmy.
Forced to vote?
Yes, and I can't thank you enough for it.
Well, you're welcome. It certainly exposed that anybody running inside the Democratic Party who gets elected isn't going to fight or lift a finger to help you. But you're the only person who's doing this, and you're nobody else will do anything like it. So we wish you all the luck in the world.
Evidently, did something happen on the Vermont Public Radio that they gave you a hard time with your position about the vaccine? Did you have some sort of conflict with the Vermont Public Radio? Somebody suggested that they dismissed you.
No, they made me take a test before I went on, but at a very similar to Vermont Public Radio, the Vermont Digger, which is the biggest online newspaper in Vermont, had a debate. And one of their questions was, are you COVID vaccinated? Which was really, they knew I wasn't because they required you to be vaccinated or, like through all these special protocols. So I don't know if the caller's referring to that, but yeah, it's a big deal in Vermont to question the orthodoxy of the whole COVID narrative. And they jumped right on that as like, look at this total wrong thinking troglodyte who doesn't trust the science TM.
Well, now you've been proven right because I don't know if you saw what happened, but over in European Parliament, the executive from Pfizer admitted they never tested the vaccines for transmission. I guess
like your employer doesnn't have enough control over your life
that's
already.
Right.
Let's make them be your doctors. What will happen though, Jimmy, is in 2 years they'll remember it as, oh yeah, I was against that the whole time. Well, yeah, the left used to be the part of the culture that was not just open-minded, but also really skeptical of corporations and very hard-line defenders of free speech. And that really swept the rug out from under me under COVID. And it reminds me a lot of that dynamic that you said force the vote. And AOC said, it takes a lot of privilege to say you want Medicare for all right now.
Yeah.
Well, no, I'll take you up on your messaging, tutoring if you want to connect sometime.
I certainly would. What is the name of your website again?
Rebirthdemocracy.com.
Rebirthdemocracy.com.